Welcome. You're listening to Living Zen. I'm Eshu, the abbot of Zen West Buddhist Society. Today's episode looks into one of the most treasured teachings in the Rinzai tradition, Kōzen Daitō Kokushi Yuikai, the final instruction of National Teacher Daitō. It's a teaching I've carried with me since my very first days of practice, and in this talk we explore what it means to return again and again to the heart of the way, no matter what life throws at us. If you'd like to learn more about our community or explore ways to practice with us, you can visit www.zenwest.ca. And if you'd like to support the teachings or access additional content, well, you'll find all of that at www.patreon.com/redmountainway. So let's begin. So tonight I wanted to talk a little bit about one of the chants that we do here every Tuesday, and in the Rinzai Zen tradition, as it's come to me, it's a chant that we do several times a day, and it's this last one that we chant. In English, it's the final instruction of Daitō Kokushi. In Japanese, it's Kōzen Daitō Kokushi Yuikai, which Kōzen means reviving Zen. Daito is great lamp. Kokushi means national teacher, which means he was an abbot that was appointed by the Emperor of Japan. And from the very first time that I sat with the Victoria Zen Center in 1995, I really liked this chant. Back then, we chanted it in Japanese, and certainly, I think when I first started practicing Zen, I really had a hard time with chanting the Japanese, and I didn't like it very much. So we translated them into English or used translations. I think this version I worked myself heavily with one of my teachers to do. And now here we are in 2025. And I've got to say, I much prefer the Japanese. Daito was an important teacher. He was the founder of a temple in Japan called Daitoku-ji, which is one of the two main Japanese Rinzai temples, the other being Myoshinji. And although this center was originally started in the Myoshinji line, even the Myoshinji temple people chant Daito, because this chant is so significant, and Daito himself was such a big personality. And there's lots of great stories about him. There's a wonderful, in his Osho days, he actually left his training temple and he went and hid out and lived under a bridge with the homeless people and disappeared amongst them for several years. And there's a wonderful story about how the emperor sent out people to find him and to discern who he was amongst all of the people who were living on the street, because nobody could tell. I also like him because he was one of the great Zen teachers, and as you can see in this chant, as we chanted, he was quite a kind of stern teacher, and yet he had problems with his body. He didn't sit full lotus, he sat in a chair. Maybe he had arthritis in his legs or his hips or something like that, but he sat in a chair. So I think particularly as a young practitioner, for me, this was significant because I thought, oh, you gotta have that body. You've gotta twist yourself up into knots. And then you have somebody like Daito. And the reason I wanted to talk about it a little bit is because going way back to April, when I first came back to Zen West, there was a few people who sort of quoted Daito quoted this sutra, and I wanted to just talk about it a little bit because there's a lot going on in this sutra, and there's lots of ways to read it in a very superficial way. You can pull out the chant if you want to sort of follow along. I'm going to be sort of bouncing around. But he starts by saying, all of you who have come into this zendo, remember that you're gathered here to practice the way and not for clothing or food. And there's a practical component to this, because in those days, it was not uncommon for people who were born into poverty to send their children to the monastery as soon as they could, because they knew that they would be fed. They knew that they would be clothed. They knew that they would be educated. The monastery would take them in. But when Daito's talking, this is the story goes that this is the very last teaching he gave, the final instruction. It said that after he finished this talk, he twisted those arthritic legs up into full lotus and died on the spot. Maybe that's true. I think in this verse, this part, he's talking about how we need to approach our practice. And I think this is just as relevant today as it was back then, because I think, especially nowadays, so many people approach meditation in a way looking for clothing or food, in the sense that it's about, I've heard that meditation can help me be more focused in my work. I've heard that meditation can help me be more productive. I've heard that meditation can help me be a better athlete, and so on and so forth. And Daito, throughout this sutra, is pointing to the heart of practice, that, yeah, sure, these things can happen. Yes, of course, meditation can be helpful, but we can't get lost in that. We have to keep bringing ourselves back to what's below, what's beyond all of this. What is it down in the depths of who you are that's calling to you, that's bringing you to the meditation hall, to the zendo? If you have shoulders, you'll have clothing. If you have a mouth, you'll have food. He's encouraging us not to be distracted by what we don't have. It's a reminder to look at this world, to look at this place that we're in and recognize that we're supported by it. In the context of the monastery, it's literal. If you follow along with the practice, if you commit yourself to upholding the community, you will be cared for. But if we extend this out to the greater world, the same is also true. There's only one thing to do: direct yourself in every activity at all times towards that which is beyond knowing. He's not just talking about the sitting, he's not just talking about the chanting, but it goes for us too. As we ride the bus, as we order our latte, as we interact with people on the street or on the phone or on Zoom, how can we bring ourselves into the awareness of that which is beyond knowing? Again, this what is beyond, what is below this surface activity. Time flies like an arrow. Our lives are very brief. I feel this more now than I did when I first started practicing Zen. As people return to the zendo that were in their 20s or 30s when I first met them, and now they're bringing their children that are in their teens and getting into their 20s. I feel this. We can feel like we've got all the time in the world. How are you spending your time? Are we distracted? Are we spiraling and spinning around, looking for clothing and food? Or are we able to return to this great matter? You must see through them, these worldly affairs. After this old monk dies, some of you may have grand temples with statues and sutras covered with gold and silver, in a great hall filled with throngs of noisy enthusiasts. Some of you may study the sutras and recite dharanis or do zazen for long periods without ever lying down. Eat only once a day and practice with zeal in every moment. None of this will mean anything if you cannot carry the untransmittable, wondrous way of the Buddhas and ancestors in your heart. This is a really thorny bush that he throws out. And I've grappled with this for the better part of 30 years. I used to take it as an admonition to avoid any kind of ornamentation. And I want to be clear that what he's pointing to here is not that there is anything inherently wrong with beautiful temples or sutras inlaid with gold and silver. I was certainly a person that studied sutras and recited dharanis and did zazen for long periods without ever laying down. And this is how I would define good practice. This is what practice is all about. I've got to sit. I've got to be a good Zen monk. I've got to be an exemplary Zen practitioner. And these are all things that you can be doing on the outside and completely miss the point. We can be doing these things for all kinds of reasons, because we think it's a good thing to do, because we want to impress our teachers, or we want to impress our friends, or we want to upset our parents. We want to have a beautiful temple. Maybe if we have more gold or silver, we'll be closer to awakening. And you might go the other way and say, I want to have a Buddha that's shaped out of a dried turd, and I want to have a zafu that's got bed bugs in it. And you can go totally the other way and think, this is what Daito was talking about. But in a lot of ways, you're just doing the same thing. Sitting with zeal, gold and silver, beautiful temples, they're all beside the point. They're not good and they're not bad. But the way that we approach the world and the way that we approach practice, it's very easy for us to get distracted, to get caught up in them and to think they're really important. And likewise, towards the end of this sutra, this chant, he talks about this one person living in the open fields in a leaky hut, eating root vegetables boiled, in the Japanese says in a two-legged pot, because the pots would have 3 legs, and so it's a broken pot, leading an upright life devoted to the investigation of the fundamental activity of self. And so it's easy to think that this is an ideal in Zen, that we want to be living in a hut in the middle of a field with a leaky roof. And that's what we get. I call it lowlier than thou. The sort of martyr idea. If we just martyr ourselves, then we'll really be good Zen practitioners. But really, as long as somebody's seeing us be martyred. This is no different than reveling in a temple filled with gold and silver, if that's what's important in your mind. What's key here is he's devoted to the investigation of the fundamental activity of self. How does this I, how does this being that arises and reflects all of the other beings arise? How does it dissolve? Where does it go? Where does it come from? In each and every one of our activities, investigating this activity, this dynamic. He talks about the untransmittable, wondrous way of the Buddhas and ancestors. Untransmittable. Why is it untransmittable? Transmission suggests something that goes from a place where it is to a place where it isn't. I can give you something. I can transmit something to you and you don't have it and I do. And I think this is how many of us feel when we approach spiritual practice. I'm looking for something that's missing in my life. I'm looking for something that I don't have. And so I seek out gurus and teachers and teachings so that I can fill this hole that's inside of me. And what Daito is pointing to with this is that already there is nothing missing. Already this untransmittable, wondrous way is functioning not only with you or within you. It is your function itself. You are a manifestation of the wonderful, untransmitted way of the Buddhas and ancestors. I heard the bell and I'm amazed I got this far. This is the grateful person that meets this old monk face to face every day and is to be respected. What more could one aspire to? What more could one aspire to? When we step into that activity, when we let go of all the distractions and obsessions, food and clothing and gold and silver and leaky roofs, and we arrive in the midst of our lives, at once we are sitting together with Daito. We're sitting together with Buddha. This practice, this capacity that resides in each one of us in every moment is a beautiful thing. And it is to be respected. The last lines we had fights over. Work hard, work hard. And it's a terrible translation. Bensen, bensen is the Japanese, and a better translation would be diligent, be diligent. But people like work hard. So, as we continue our practice, we're often caught up in all kinds of things. There are periods in our lives where we practice a great deal. We're fully engaged and we're sitting regularly and we're collaborating with community. And there are times where life happens and we've got sick parents, or we have lost a job, or we have to move house. And that nice, diligent practice we have kind of falls apart. It's inevitable. And then we land. And what do we do then? Do we remember our practice? Do we remember this activity? Do we remember this investigation of the fundamental activity? This is where I think diligence is most important. To shift our view of the practice of awakening from something that we need to do today, something that we need to get right now, to a commitment that can carry us through our whole lives. And as the waves of life rise and fall, we return over and over and over again. Be diligent. Be diligent. So this is the last sit of 2025. And I'm so grateful to all of you that you chose to come and share it together. I hope that you have a beautiful December, beautiful end of the year, beautiful holiday season. That you share relationships and joy with one another. I hope that I see you again in the new year. Thank you. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Living Zen. If you'd like to explore more about our community, upcoming events, or how to deepen your own practice, you can visit us anytime at www.zenwest.ca. And if you want to support this work or access extra teachings and reflections, you'll find all of that at www.patreon.com/redmountainway. Take good care, and I hope to sit with you again soon.